Hi, everybody. Jason Klom with the Comedy on Vinyl podcast. I am listening to a comedy album a day, almost. Okay, so now I am going to listen to 365 comedy albums this year. If you saw yesterday's episode, it was a sincere apology for not being able to listen to one. I had jury duty, so that's what happens. But that way, either way, today I listened to 2 to make up for it. So I'm going to listen to 365. I'm not going to be doing some crazy shit where I have to, as far as I know, listen to 7 at a time, because that would be impossible. Okay, I love comedy albums. Obviously, it's my thing. That would be way too much. So I picked 2 albums at random. One was one out of my vinyl collection. The other one is one that I had sitting on my phone. I have it in my vinyl collection, but I'd already ripped it. I'm ripping these as I have them. That's the whole point of this, is so that I can actually listen to them and have them archived and stuff for my own use. And, for who knows, in the future, you never know what's going to happen. Maybe you need them, and maybe you leave the country and you need digital copies of everything. So the first thing that I picked is one I've actually talked about before. Not in its entirety, but we did talk about it with Jeff Abraham. Jeff Abraham is an awesome dude. He's a PR guy. He's also got one of the largest comedy album collections, the largest I've ever seen. So the Abraham Comedy Archive is filled with great stuff, and because of him, we actually premiered a Bob Newhart album on Comedy on Vinyl. Not an album, pardon me, a sketch. The Paul Revere sketch. If you listen to it on that episode, I don't know the number of the episode right now off the top of my head, just search Newhart Comedy on Vinyl. And they did I think they covered it on the Interrobang website. But we premiered a long-lost Newhart sketch about Paul Revere. It was something that was actually recorded in studio, not in front of an audience. That's not something Bob Newhart did. So the guess that Jeff had was that it was probably done for a corporate or something like that. And it's funny. It's very funny. But it's weird because there's no audience. There's no reaction to it. But I decided to pick one, again, totally at random. I'm like, well, I feel like I've heard what Bob Newhart has to offer, and I'd forgotten how much of the stuff that we covered on this episode with Jeff, because he picked some sort of rare or less listened to Bob Newhart stuff, and I picked This Is It, okay? And this is, sorry, it's 1967, I just remember that. So there you go, wonderful cover, Bob Newhart. What's interesting about this one is there are definitely his typical one-sided comedy bits. When I say one-sided, it's not as an insult. It's from one character's perspective. But there's no phone bits on this. And in addition, this is him doing straight stand-up, meaning no character. There's always characters in them, but there's no. It's not necessarily phone stuff. It's always one-sided, but it's different. And there's a lot of him still doing setup where he talks about how he's scared of flying, which you can tell clearly becomes an episode of the Bob Newhart Show later on, which, by the way, one of the best sitcoms of all time. The first Newhart Show, Bob Newhart Show is great. Newhart is also wonderful. The first Newhart Show is just phenomenal. And this is great. Every bit on here is funny. I think we talked about with Jeff Abraham that the Pussycat story on here would be considered un-PC, but it's not that big of a deal. He's just doing a voice. He's doing a very effeminate voice. And it's not, it's not meant to say anything. That said, there's some every bit on here is good. It's all character bits, but it's all very from the perspective of one character, no other voice. You always have to assume what the other person is saying, what's going on the other end of the line, or what's going on in the other part of the scene. And that is the magic of what Bob Newhart does. Even when he's telling stories about being on the plane and stuff, he does seem to have this element of letting you fill in the blanks, and that's why it's so funny. In addition to him just laughing at himself, which is it's not. I don't know. He's got the language with which he'll tell a story on here too. Just calling you baby is very. It's so very lounge and very hip. You don't associate Bob Newhart with that necessarily, but then you remember that he's best friends with Don Rickles, and that's very hip, very cool guy. Despite being, the straightest, whitest man in comedy. But he's also, he's in that group of sick comics. That was the thing that they like to call them. And, but Jeff was right. The reason he picked this one is it's very underappreciated, and it's a fantastic album, and it's a lot of fun. Now, the second album that I picked, so we're on to number 24, right? 24, yeah. This was the one that was sitting on my phone. And I'm like, I haven't listened to this. I'll grab the pile that I have, or some of the pile that I have. I apologize for the wait. I have been studying the vice presidency for a while with my buddy Matt Sachs. And we're very, we're just in love with the office of the vice presidency. He's the fact machine. He remembers it more than I do. I'm the one who remembers what makes it all so funny. And because of that, my obsession with the vice presidency has crossed over with my obsession with vinyl comedy. And so this is just the beginning of what I have. It doesn't look like that much, but I've also got all the First Family albums, all the Bob Booker and Earl Dowd albums. There's so many other people. And, I mean, we've got just a ton sitting here. Some of them this is a Russian parody of the First Family. This is Richard the 37th. There's a bunch of just Nixon stuff, and this is called Spiro Says About Face. So it's about Spiro Agnew, Richard Nixon's vice president, if you don't know. Orson Welles, The Begatting of the President. I'm told that's very good. I haven't listened to it yet. Let's see. Kermit Schaefer's LBJ Roast. Kermit Schaefer, big fan of the blooper. David Fry, well known for doing I have 3 David Fry Richard Nixon albums. There's 3 of them here. 3 separate Nixon albums. Let's see. There's Lindenland. That's about LBJ. It's an evening with Richard Nixon by my good friend Gore Vidal. I say my good friend. He called my buddy and I, Matt, better interviewers than Ken Burns, which that is something I will take to my grave because it's a lot of fun. Where's the picture? Here we go. There's Matt and I with Gore Vidal. Anyway, I haven't listened to that one yet. Should have. Again, my best friend Gore Vidal. I should have listened to it. But anyway, long story short, I've got a lot to burn through as far as those go. So the one I picked today, we already talked about Will Jordan, so I thought it'd be fun to do another Will Jordan album, or one he's associated with. And the one I picked was the Great Comedy Album, starring Spiro T. Agnew. It's a wonderful little caricature on the cover. Will Jordan does voices of Ed Sullivan, obviously, and he also does Richard Nixon. Now, what this is its own thing. I started playing it while I was doing something else. And didn't entirely, and so, you hear Will Jordan doing his introduction as Ed Sullivan, doing a Richard Nixon impersonation, and then you start to hear this man speaking awkwardly, and you start to hear some audience, some laughter, some applause, and it's bad. It would be sharp satire if there was at least a punch here and there. The audience seems to be the same looped, canned laughter over and over again. You're like, well, even if this is a speech, even if this is an actual speech, why would you loop the same comedy track, the same canned laughter over and over again? And then you start to realize, it starts to mean something. And you start to realize, this is Spiro Agnew talking, the actual Spiro Agnew talking. And the best way to make the point is, number one, only have laughter running through it. Have it running at parts that are punctuated rather than actual being punch lines. And have it be the same laughs over and over again. For, I think it runs a little under 30 minutes. There's some of the dumbest shit Spiro Agnew ever said. And if you don't know anything about Agnew and Nixon, most people know that Nixon resigned in shame. Agnew had to resign ahead of time for other related reasons, but clearly he was on trial before in Nixon's place before they could ever get Nixon on trial. You want to solidly punish someone, you punish the VP, and then eventually Nixon is pardoned, etc. But he's no longer president. But Spiro Agnew, I guess you sort of forget, was a master of language in a way that we're not. He's the one who coined nattering nabobs of negativism. He did, or his speechwriters did. He had this way with language, which was not necessarily an intellectual one, but it was one that definitely caught the public attention. And I mean, it's enough that there are, at least several comedy. There are enough about Nixon, of course, but there are comedy albums about the VP. That was not a thing that happened, except for if you go back to Of Thee I Sing, which was a musical back in the 30s, written specifically a parody of Charles Curtis, my favorite VP, because he was such a moron. Agnew is probably the second biggest dipshit of the group. I'm gonna just be honest. I'm just going to read from the liner notes. First of all, there's the cover, there's the back, there's Nixon as a clown. The inside, there's a little bit of an explanation of the young comedian Will Jordan and who he is. A few more, Nixon and Agnew. Spiro Agnew, by the way, there's a gentleman in Orange County here in LA who created the Spiro Agnew watch, which was a Mickey Mouse watch. And supposedly, Spiro Agnew actually sued them for making this watch, for making fun of them. So sued them for satire. To the best of my knowledge, the people who actually made this album were not sued. This is made by the Flying Dutchman newspaper. And Funny Times USA Ltd. is the name of the company. I want to read from the liner notes just a little bit, just to give you an idea what it's about. Satire, wrote Jonathan Swift, a master of that clarifying art, is sort of a glass, wherein beholders do generally discover everybody's face but their own. In listening to The Great Comedy Album, a classic illustration of unwitting self-satire, will Spiro T. Agnew really see himself as so many of us do? Probably not, because the vice president, as a preeminent, polysyllabic practitioner of what George Orwell called newspeak, is himself, alas, a victim of that manner of so debasing language that a listener can either rage or laugh, and often, for sanity's sake, is driven to do both simultaneously. If that doesn't sound familiar to you, I'm speaking to the wrong person. You can feel free to switch off. This shit is startlingly important. Now, here's the thing. Listening to it, even for a half an hour, is stultifying. It is rough to listen to, because once you realize that this is not Will Jordan doing an impression, that what you're listening to is boring, shitty speeches. Even if somebody were recreating it, the satire would be strong. But the fact that they have the guts to just put these speeches on tape and then put audio under it, put laughter under it, it gets really depressing very quick. At the end of all the liner notes are great, but the very final liner notes are, and by golly, here is Spiro T. Agnew on this very record, telling us how especially good he found the morale in Vietnam among Americans and Vietnamese government officials because of the success of the pacification program. This was a mouthpiece, a professional mouthpiece. This was a man who worked in Baltimore. He was, he was the governor of Baltimore, governor of Maryland. Hated all. I'm saying hate. That might be a little extreme, but it's true. He was a racist. He was an obvious racist. There's no doubt about it. This is a man who just would say whatever it took to get wherever he needed to be. And the more you listen to this, you should find this. Maybe it's on YouTube. If it's not, email me, jason@comedyonvinyl.com. I might be able to help you find it. It's important. You should listen to it. It's a kind of album that should be recreated. Sorry, I was in the middle of speaking. Question myself for being sure whether or not Agnew was governor of Maryland. I knew it, but I've had some help tonight, so that would be why I don't entirely remember. I don't remember where I was, but long story short, it's important to question the people who are speaking to you, especially if the things they're speaking to you sound great but don't say anything. Now, if you're not the kind of person who questions these things, I don't know what to say, but you're watching this. You must have a brain, okay? And if you're interested in somebody who's examining records, you must have an interest in examining things yourself. So you're a smart person. I'm going to go ahead and say that. You're smart. You don't need you don't need that from me, but I don't give a shit. You're smart. Question everything you hear is what's important. This album should be recreated. Absolutely. It's a pain to listen to, but do you know what? That's the point. That's the point of living. Some things are a pain to listen to. And because of that, it took balls to make this, or ovaries. If there are ladies involved, there should be. So it took guts to make this, and that's what's important. Satire is often very painful to listen to or read or see. That's kind of the point. It's the kind of comedy that comes, that starts with a knife point. The laugh comes as you're gasping for your last breath. And then, hey, maybe I can fix this at the last moment. One hopes so. The Great Comedy Album, starring Spiro T. Agnew, is one of the few things, it seems to me, and I don't know enough about the editing process of this album, seems to me to be uncut. This is not one of those where there are albums definitely where, actually, let me pull it up. I can't remember the name of it because I'm very drunk. Here we go. So Spiro says about face, I started ripping this a while ago and thought I could listen to it while I did. This, if I remember correctly, is, yeah, here we go, edited by. It's a funny edit. If you saw Good Morning Vietnam, you see the origins of this kind of thing. I did it myself as a kid. You cut yourself in doing interviews and make this person sound stupid. This is largely unedited. The man sounds stupid on his own. Even if it were an actor recreating it, it's Agnew's speeches. You know, it's unedited, and that should depress you. It should make you laugh at the same time, and it should make you think, and it should make you question things. I don't get political with the Comedy on Vinyl podcast, but I could if I wanted to, because I don't give a shit. You should listen to this. You should listen to this. Look up more about Agnew. He seems incidental, but that's how history sometimes works. We pay more attention to Nixon, who is, oh, look at him, he's this interesting figure. They made this whole movie, Frost Nixon, about it, based off a play, of course. They made this whole, there's this whole thing about Nixon, and oh, what a conflicted guy he is. Oh, he's kind of evil, but oh, maybe he's kind of nice, but he's got a legend to maintain. Then there's Agnew, who, by and large, got away with it. Sure, his career was over, but he got away with being a garbage asshole of a person. And it just happens. But you know what? He also got destroyed. He got destroyed. How did he get destroyed? Well, not by this album, but certainly with the help of people like the folks who made this album. Just something to think about. I like comedy. My name's Jason Klom. You know what? Subscribe to the Comedy on Vinyl podcast. Follow us at Comedy on Vinyl everywhere you can. Go to stolendress.com. That's our production company. This has been the longest one so far. I promise there will be more. I will do this every day as I can. If I have to catch up, I will. But I'll do my best to do this every single day. Hashtag it Comedy Album a Day. If you share it, please share it. And that's it. My name's Jason Klom. Thank you for watching. And as always, have a good thing.